Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation and entrepreneurship. My name is Steve Glaveski, and each week I'll bring you authors, corporate innovation managers, entrepreneurs, and above all else, thought leaders on the topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you successfully navigate your innovation journey. Every Monday, I'll bring you a world-class thought leader such as Steve Blank, Alex Osterwalder, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, or Whitney Johnson, just to name a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you some quick digestible insights myself to help end your week on a high before you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is proudly brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub, school, and consultancy that works with large organizations to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies, and tools required to explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. If your organization needs support coming up with ideas, testing and turning those ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit Collective Campus online at www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared. Today I'll be speaking with the former editor of Harvard Business Review, Karen Dillon. She's currently a contributing editor to HBR, focused on the topics of leadership, managing people, managing yourself, and entrepreneurship. Karen has worked closely with some of the world's greatest thought leaders, including Clayton Christensen, Michael Porter, Vijay Govindarajan, Daniel Isenberg, and A.G. Lafley. A talented, award-winning writer, she's also a passionate, engaging speaker, and is especially skilled at personalizing the themes of her books to make them actionable and relevant to each audience. Dillon is co-author of several best-selling titles, including How Will You Measure Your Life, which she co-wrote with Clayton Christensen and James Allworth. The book, born out of a series of powerful lectures and seminars by Clayton Christensen, began with an article conceived by Dillon for HBR. Most recently, she and Clayton Christensen collaborated with Taddy Hall and David Duncan to co-author the recently released Competing Against Luck, the story of innovation and customer choice, a groundbreaking book with the potential to reframe industries. It is based on a simple yet profound idea put forward by Christensen in The Innovator's Dilemma that customers don't buy products and services, they hire them to do a job. And understanding which jobs your customers need done is key to innovation success. So if you're involved in product development at any level, whether it's for a large organization, a startup, or even working in government or not-for-profits, you will get a hell of a lot of value out of this podcast. So with that, it gives me much pleasure to introduce you to Karen Dillon. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
No, it's an honor to have you on the program. And I imagine you're joining us from Boston. Is that right?
I am joining you from Boston, yes.
Fantastic. So you're not caught up in a book tour for Competing Against Luck just yet?
Not just yet, although there's, as you know, a virtual book tour. There's a lot one does,
Yes.
from the privacy of your own home, but to communicate with the world in lots of ways, and we are doing that. But yes, Clay Christensen, the main author, the co-author, is actually in Mexico at the moment, so He is on a book tour. But I'm holding down the fort in Boston.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad to be part of your your virtual Australian book tour, I guess we'll call it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So congratulations are in order. Competing Against Luck did come out earlier this week, a book which you did co-write with, as you've mentioned, Clayton Christensen, as well as Taddy Hall and Dave Duncan. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So I guess the book explores the concept of jobs to be done, something which was first highlighted in Clayton Christensen's 1995 epic, The Innovator's Dilemma. And so the book explores the topic at length. So I guess when it comes to market research, Karen, often organizations have a tendency to segment customers along demographic lines, where they live, how old they are, gender, household income, and so on. But I guess the question is that enough?
Well, it's certainly not a bad thing to do. It's a start. It's sort of putting you in the ballpark. But what we believe very strongly is that segmenting by finer and finer degrees of those kinds of characteristics and demographics can get you close, but it can never actually explain why somebody makes the choices that they make. Just because of the fact that I'm a white, suburban, middle-aged mother of 2 teenage daughters isn't going to tell you why I might choose to hire, in our language, an Airbnb rather than a hotel on any given occasion. You can't know anything about the context in which I make the choices I make to buy something or not buy something by even as much information as you can possibly gather about me from a demographic or even a psychographic segment.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I guess that leads me to ask the question around, what is a job? And perhaps you can talk through the story of the milkshake, because I think that captures it beautifully.
Let me explain. I'll tell you our definition, and then I'll do the story so you can think of the definition as I'm talking about it.
Sure.
Because it is, we do use these words to capture something that's a little bit complex. So bear with us for a minute. Our definition of a job to be done, the to be done, is important there because it's looking for something you don't yet have right yet. You haven't solved this problem in your life yet. A job to be done is the progress that a person is trying to make to achieve something in particular circumstances. And all of those words are very important, progress and circumstances. But let me back up and tell the story of the milkshake, because it is a lovely story. So Clayton Christensen, who is the Harvard Business School professor and the primary author of the book, is famous for his theory of disruptive innovation, which most of your listeners will know. And he really was focusing for years on what do we know about why really good businesses fail? What do we know about the failure of good businesses? But as he was continuing to refine and think about that theory, the theory of disruptive innovation, it occurred to him that he didn't understand enough about what do we know about how companies know how to grow? How do they successfully grow? It's the other side of the coin of that. And he was involved in a project that was trying to improve sales at a fast food chain, and understand a curious finding that people who were actually studying people coming and going and looking for the similar demographic and characteristics of customers who were strangely buying a surprising number of milkshakes in the morning. So the team stood in the fast food restaurant and studied coming and going, and what did they have in common? And they couldn't quite see a pattern. They weren't all a particular age. They weren't all seemingly from a particular income bracket based on the cars they drove or, how quickly they pulled up money or anything they could determine. They couldn't find a common denominator. But for some reason, a lot of people were coming and buying milkshakes, which is an odd thing to do in the morning. And as they were trying to solve the puzzle of what is making these people buy milkshakes, maybe we can sell them more if we can figure out what it was. They asked people, well, how could we make the milkshake better? Which is a question lots of companies ask about their products to their customers. How can we make it better? Should we make them chunkier, thicker, put some fruit in it so it feels healthy to you? Do you want more chocolate, more flavors? They went through a whole series of what characteristics of these milkshakes can we improve so that you'll be even more inclined to buy them? And people kind of scratched their heads and didn't have any one answer. There was nothing consistent. There was no pattern. And then it occurred to them, let's think about this problem in a really different way. There's a reason that they're coming in to get milkshakes at this surprising time. What if we asked them the question this way? You're obviously trying to achieve something by buying that milkshake. Let's use this language and say, what job are you hiring that milkshake to do? Now, that may seem like a funny question to ask someone in the lobby of a fast food chain, but they started to think of it this way. So let's explain it to you. If you didn't come in and buy that milkshake today, what else were you considering doing or buying at this moment in your day? And as they talked to people, they realized they were talking to commuters who were on their way to work and maybe had a little bit of a long and boring drive ahead of them. So if you weren't going to come in to get the milkshake today, what were you thinking of doing instead? Well, you know what? I thought about a banana. I'll use your language. I thought about hiring a banana. But you know what? A banana, you eat it in like a minute. If you leave the peel in the car, it smells. Your fingers get a little bit sticky. I'm not so sure. Banana's not a great choice all the time. Or I was thinking about a bagel. A bagel is a little bit dry. You can't spread the cream cheese on it easily when the car is hard to eat in the car. Sometimes I actually go and get a Snickers bar. I feel like a little bit of indulgence. Hey, it has peanuts. That's healthy, right? And as they started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, they realized that the milkshakes weren't competing with other milkshakes at other fast food chains. They were competing with this strange array of options that people could choose to hire, again, our language, to help them, the progress they wanted to make, to help them get through a long and boring commute, little bit of entertainment, give them a little bit of something to eat or drink so they wouldn't be starving when they got to work and they wouldn't go straight to the candy machine. It was helping them in the very particular circumstances of being a commuter in a car for a long drive that was boring. So they needed it to be some kind of entertainment, make them feel a little bit good about starting off their day. So there was nothing they could do to make the milkshake itself better necessarily. It wasn't competing with chocolatier milkshakes at the store down the road. It was competing with a Snickers bar or a bagel or a banana that made your car smelly. And when you reframe what you're competing with in that way, you think of it through the lens of what job they were hiring the milkshake to do. It changes completely the way you think about how do I get better and more successful or improve my innovation efforts.
Yeah, and that captures it beautifully. And I love how the story, and excuse me if I don't paraphrase this 100%, but how the story then expands to a busy professional who's picked up his son after school, and on the way home he decides to buy his son a milkshake, and the job in that case is, well, he hasn't got time to play catch with his son later. So that's potentially the circumstance, but he wants to invest in that father-son relationship, so he buys his son a milkshake.
It's a great example of the circumstance being the driving factor there. Same product, milkshake. The same person could be hiring it in the morning for one job and in the afternoon for a completely different job. And so a dad or mom wanting to feel like a good parent for 1 minute in a hectic day, the milkshake is not competing with a soda. It's competing with, do we stop at the toy store? Can we shoot a couple of hoops? It's competing with whatever is going to make that dad feel like, whatever he's going to hire to feel like a good father in the circumstances. Yeah. And so if you tried to improve the milkshake based on an average of all those people who came in during the day, the afternoon people and the morning people, you would have a product that would kind of one size fits none, instead of thinking about the particular circumstances that compel people to buy a milkshake or hire a milkshake to solve the job to be done.
So I guess, would this concept then, force marketers and product developers to rethink their competition? Because in this case, competition is not just another drink. It's everything that the milkshake drinkers could have done in that moment to fulfill whatever, social, emotional, or functional outcomes they were looking for. For example, if somebody goes out and spends a few $100s or maybe thousands, I don't know. I've never bought a Chanel handbag, but let's just say they spend $700 on a Chanel handbag because they've had a terrible week and they want some retail therapy. I mean, they could have hired, say, a big chocolate cake and just binge eaten, as some people do when they've had, a bad day at work. So is that fair to say?
It's really fair to say it. In fact, I think for me personally, having been working in innovation in the media industry for years and years and years, I think the biggest takeaway, having worked on this book with Clay, is that if you don't have things in your competitive set that are really surprising to you, like milkshakes and going to the toy store or playing basketball, if you simply think of your competition as things that are classically in your category that you can track easily, and it's Coke versus Pepsi or whatever, then you perhaps have not understood the job well enough to actually truly innovate and improve on all the things that actually matter to the people choosing to hire it for their own job to be done. I think that's a really important takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a hell of a lot of sense. And I guess the question then needs to be asked. I'm a corporate innovator. We're launching a new program. How do we first go about identifying said customer jobs?
Well, as you mentioned a second ago, the definition of a job, I talked about being the progress. The jobs, that's okay. That's to be done is important. Well, that's actually an important distinction, because to be done means there's a gap between all of the available solutions to whatever your job may be, but you're not satisfied. You haven't found a good solution to it yet. If the gap between what's available and what you offer is actually relatively small, yours is a little bit better or a little bit faster or a little bit whatever, you're probably not going to have enough potential to convince people to switch, to jump over to your product or service. So it's quite important that you're looking for a big gap between what they would like to solve their job to be done, even if they can't articulate it, and what exists at the moment. That's the first step that you talked about. But it is actually, it's very hard. And I think we're very clear that that's not an add water and stir solution, nor is it some magical algorithm that will tell you. You have to really kind of be a detective. You can't, one thing I know for sure, you can't armchair quarterback it. That's what we would say in the States. You can't sit there in your conference room and brainstorm based on what you, the engineers, or what you, the marketers, or what you, in our case, the editors, assume people would want. I think that's a really dangerous situation to be in, because you've never tried to observe in the context or ask questions in the context of people who are actually struggling to get the job done. You're just imagining what you can give them that should make their lives better, but that may not at all matter to them and actually get the job done. We do give a bunch of possible ways to start being detective, to figure out the job to be done. And again, really important that you sort of piece it together slowly and not assume anything. We start off by saying you're looking for stories, not stuff. You're looking for, almost in your mind, and maybe in reality, shooting almost like a mini video of the person who's hiring the product or service. You either hope that they'll hire from you or a competitor in some way. What were they doing before? What are they doing afterwards? What are they struggling with in the moment? What are all the circumstances that are going into that moment? And there's so much you probably can't see, but you could at least infer about. Again, you mentioned it, there's a really big emotional component to what they're trying to accomplish that may not be obvious at the moment and certainly can't be described, in a product description really easily. There's a social component to it. There's a really rich kind of three-dimensional context of what they're trying to achieve and why it matters to them, that you need to piece together sort of story by story before you start deciding that you actually have a pattern there. So that's one way to think about it. It's almost a video experiment in your mind, is what can you learn from watching people, but then inferring, importantly, again, the progress they're trying to make and the social and emotional components, as well as just the functional.
Definitely. And I think you touched on a couple of great points there. I mean, the first one, you did say that the product has to be solving or addressing a job to be done in a way that's significantly better. It can't just be a little bit better. And I think a lot of people in startup circles especially say that, hey, if you're building something, you need to be 10x better, not just a little bit better or a little bit cheaper, because people have, and I think the book also alludes to these barriers that people have when it comes to switching to new products, such as your habits, being used to doing things a certain way, even if they are a bit clunky, you're used to them, or just that anxiety of changing, of choosing something new and wanting to avoid loss. I mean, how critical is it to be conscious of these barriers to switching new products when designing those new or when identifying jobs to be done?
I think that's hugely important, because I'll just give you an example I think a lot of people can relate to. How many of us know that when it's time to get a new mobile phone, that we could potentially turn the one we have in and get some credit or something for it? We probably will never need it again, right? But in reality, how many of us have those stuck in a drawer someplace? Why? Because I have this anxiety that, what if I drop my phone down the sewer on the day that I have to get on a plane? Like, you come up with these crazy anxious things about getting ready. So the fear of the new is so big that you come up with this crazy compensating solution of, I'm going to keep my my phone just in case I ever need it, and we never do. The anxiety component of that is so big that even though we call it the push, the push of the situation I'm in is annoying, and look how fabulous this new possible scenario can be. If that is not way more powerful than the inertia of it's hard to make change, I'm not going to bother getting that new mobile phone because I'll have to learn all those things and it's annoying to me. This is fine. And big, the anxiety of the switch. What could go wrong? I'm used to it that way. If those second two forces are stronger, people just aren't going to make the switch, no matter how fabulous your product is. And I see it all the time. People who think, if I can just communicate better with my customers about all the fabulous features that we have, more people are gonna take this or keep it. They're gonna keep renewing it or whatever, or get it again. But they don't understand that equally, bigger, the elephant in the room is the anxiety about losing the devil and the comfort with the way you solve the problem now. Those are really huge factors. And if you don't understand that switch is big, you're not going to successfully convince customers to do it. And another way to think about it is for a customer or a potential customer to hire your product, they probably have to fire something else. And by that we mean, what are they letting go of? Or what solution are they willing to say that really wasn't good enough? And if you don't know what they're firing to hire yours, again, you probably aren't ready for them. They're not going to make that leap to hire you because yours is not a better solution overall with all those things taken into account.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned phones there. I mean, I think I've still got a 5110 from Nokia back in 1998 somewhere. But I mean, Google recently announced their Pixel phone, and I think one of the features they were well lauding was around the ability to easily transfer contacts, data, etc., from say an iPhone over to a Google Pixel phone. And for me, the anxiety of moving across to an Android phone for the last few years because all my data is on an iPhone, it's all synced with my different devices. It's been too much for me to switch, even though many of my peers say, hey, Android, it's better, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, no, look, all my data's here. I like it this way. So it looks as if Google may have, designed that into the new product, being quite conscious of that barrier to switching that people have.
That sounds exactly what they're doing. The whole experience, it's not just whatever the product is or service is, the whole experience of purchasing and using that product is a critical part of getting the job to be done right. And that's a really big component of the experience that you've just mentioned. It's taking some of the stress, and maybe not all of it, away from literally the switch. Probably once you got used to it, you got used to it. But the fear of what if I lose it? Again, my fear, what if I drop it down the sewer? They're crazy, but they've gone so far to alleviate some of the anxiety. It's a really big step.
Yeah, definitely. And when you were talking about the recording a video of customers, essentially, or playing a video, essentially it sounds like you're talking about customer journey mapping or some of these human-centered design techniques. Is that right?
It's a piece of it, and we don't think any of those things are bad. It's just we generally think it has to go further, and there's more to know, and there's more context. What we go in the book, we share a technique that the guy that we focus on in the book, a guy called Bob Mester, uses, which I think is really good. I've had him do it to me, and it's really interesting. He does what he calls a jobs to be done interview, where he's looking to just kind of walk through the timeline of how you made the decision that you made, so he can start identifying what were the big sort of emotional triggers and functional triggers and social triggers. And it's really interesting if you chronicle the decision, starting with someone who's actually already made the decision. So it's not, I think I will. It's, here's why. I just bought the new phone. I just switched over. March through the kind of whole history of how to get to the moment of actually making the decision. And it's almost always obvious that there were multiple critical moments that played a big role in the decision that may not be obvious at all, that helped tease out the anxieties that were there to overcome, or the draw, why the draw was so much better. So it's partly documentary put together with really truly trying to get at what the causal mechanism, what was the true why that you did, and what surrounded that why, what was important in making that why decision for you to actually go ahead and make the change.
Yeah, and the book actually does provide an example of, I suppose, a jobs to be done interview, which goes on for about 5 or 6 pages, which I guess does really capture how deep you need to get with those questions and how much probing you really need to do to get to the heart of the job to be done.
We do. It's a real job to be done interview, and we made the choice to run it in that length to show that it's not like one moment of aha. It's piecing together everything. What we did is interviewed a guy who bought a new mattress, and you might look at the data about the guy, again, look at his demographics, or look at the fact that he bought a new mattress in a Costco in what seemed to be an impulse purchase. But then when you back the story up and get to how did he get to that moment of deciding from touching it, he didn't even lay on it because in Costco they were boxed up in boxes. He touched the sample pad or whatever, the sand, to making a decision to purchase a mattress. Long story short, you realize the guy needs to feel like a better father because he's starting a new business. He's stressed all the time, and he's somehow attributed, and husband, he's attributed his poor sleep as a big reason why he's not being the father he wants to be and the husband he wants to be. And so he's tried to do other things before, but in that moment, the new mattress is competing with Red Bull to let me have more energy. I mean, it's competing with a strange set of things. And so for whatever reason, that moment one of the big anxieties was, would his wife let him do it? Would she criticize him for getting it? And she's in the store with him, and she sort of says, you know what, you've been not sleeping well for a long time. I'm kind of tired of you complaining about it. Fine, get the new mattress. And then the anxiety is released. So he buys a mattress in what you would think is an impulse purchase, but it's actually been months and months in the making, and all kinds of odds and ends, Advil, ibuprofen, and Red Bull being other things he was trying to hire to help him feel more energetic to be a better dad. It's just an interesting piecing together of what looks like there's nothing to examine here, and turns out there is something very interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. And even I suppose the feedback he got from his wife in that instance, I mean, even though she wasn't making a purchasing decision, I guess her decision to say, hey, buy it, would you say that's a job to be done of sorts? It's, hey, I just want to shut this guy up. So I'm just going to say yes.
She's a piece of his job. I think she's part of the context of it. But I mean, maybe her, I don't know, maybe her job to be done was partly, I need to be a more supportive, I need him to see that I'm being a more supportive wife. Who knows? But they could both be doing two different jobs within the same moment. But mostly I saw that as the anxiety of the switch of buying that new mattress is gone the moment she kind of blesses it.
Yeah, fantastic. So say we've gone through this process of performing jobs to be done, interviews and so on, and maybe we've come up with, say, 8 to 10 jobs. So I'm familiar with a few different tools, obviously Likert scales, and in the Innovator solution there is a jobs to be done prioritization tool. But I mean, what's your advice for organizations or for product teams who say have identified 10 jobs and aren't quite sure which one to tackle first?
Oh, that's interesting. You mean 10 jobs that they could be creating products or services to solve?
Potentially, yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I would look at where's that gap, right? Where's the biggest gap between what exists now and what their solution is possibly offering? I mean, I think we talked about this in the book, but I think it's true. When you identify the competitive set and realize that potentially your biggest competitor is nothing, meaning people are doing nothing rather than solve the job that they're struggling with. So they'd rather lump along with workarounds or just dealing with whatever imperfect situation they have. If there is nothing out there that is picked as a better solution to the job, that's a really big opportunity. That's when I think your heart should be racing a little bit more as an innovator, saying, okay, no one's solving this problem, but we identify it's a pretty gaping problem. So let's try to solve it. That is really a potential for a lot of growth.
Yeah. So I guess it's about identifying the gap between how they currently solve that job or how they currently get that job done, and how satisfied they are by the existing solution. I guess the biggest gap, that makes sense. So I guess when it comes to disruptive innovation, the Innovator's Dilemma put forward the concept of competing with non-consumption, where audiences are dramatically, say, overserved by existing offerings and therefore don't engage. It sounds like the jobs to be done framework can help us identify such customers.
It definitely can. There's a really good example of that, which would be both of disruptive innovation and of jobs to be done, is Intuit, the accounting software company. Their first product that was very successful was Quicken, which is a personal financial software. And that was a very successful program right away. And Scott Cook, who is the founder or the co-founder of Intuit, told us that for 4 years, he ignored the fact that he learned that a lot of small business people who ran small businesses were kind of jerry-rigging the Quicken personal financial software to do the accounting accounting software for their small business books. And he just thought it made no sense because he knew there were better software packages out there that were sort of accounting standard terms and, high powered and could do everything, an accountant might be able to do for your business, that were out there that weren't super expensive. So for 4 years, he ignored the fact that people, scratch your head, people keep doing this silly thing with Quicken when they could get this much better product out there for their small businesses, until they kind of clicked. The job to be done for those businesses was not, I want my books to look like the highest end CPA did them, comes in once a week and does them to perfection. The job to be done was, I don't want to have to worry about doing my books. I want my bills paid. I want to collect money in. I want that not to be a stressful thing in my business. You're not competing with that software. You're competing with throwing all the receipts in shoe boxes and organizing them at the end of the month, or hiring your brother-in-law to do your books. So when they realized the competition wasn't this product that or existing products that were out there, but it was kind of nothing, doing the minimal amount of work on your books possible, they actually created a product that Scott Cook describes as half the functionality at twice the price. And that became QuickBooks, which was a gigantic success. I think within 4 months of launch, it was the market leader. It's because they reassessed what the job to be done was for those people who really were not happy with all the available options, and it turned out to be a very big opportunity.
Yeah. Would you say that's an example of hearing what customers don't say?
I think it's a great example. And again, they were sort of saying it with their behavior, but and if you ask customers will always say yes. They want more and better. They want things that, would you like bay windows in this luxury condominium complex? Sure. Would you like granite countertops? Absolutely. Of course, those things all sound good. Their actions and their behavior and what they actually choose to do are where you're going to really find the insights rather than what they say. It's not that they don't think they mean it. It's just you can't really tell a customer's true value code until they've actually made a decision that involves their money and their choice and their irrevocable choice. You can see what actually mattered most to them when they had to make a decision once they've actually made that decision, and you can dissect it backwards. But if you're just anticipating, wouldn't it be nice? Yes, all those things would be nice. Is that the reason I'm going to make my decision? Probably not.
Yeah. And I guess what becomes apparent to me is that using the jobs to be done approach, companies can avoid the trap of just building faster, supposedly better products, focusing purely on the functional side, by honing in on what's really driving that customer. I guess it supports business model innovation when you look at different approaches to solving that same problem and getting the outcome for the customer. The name of the company does escape me, but I'll try and edit it in afterwards on the show notes. But recently I came across an example where an organization, rather than providing better legal services, they are using analytics software to determine the likelihood of, say, an organization going to court over a particular topic. And this software will say, well, based on history, you're probably 80% likely to lose. And therefore, you shouldn't even contest it in the first place. Rather than saying, hey, we're going to get you the best lawyers and we're going to get you this and that, it's basically, well, you're probably going to lose, so you shouldn't even contest it in the first place.
I think that's a really good example. That's a totally different way of thinking about what's the job. The job isn't provide me with the best legal services. The job is, I don't want to get involved in this. The job is help me. We talk about that. There are a lot of jobs that are, I don't want to. I don't want to be in court. I don't want to spend a lot of money on lawyers. It's a different job, and it may seem like they're really close, and can't you just pick the best lawyers who will advise you that? Maybe, but maybe the job to be done is I don't want to start having myself be bound to expensive legal services to make decisions. I want to be able to make decisions for myself. There are emotional components of that and social components. I want to be seen as a leader who can make good decisions, and this tool gives me confidence that I can do it. Or I want my peers to see me using my judgment or spending the money judiciously. There's a lot that goes into that, and it sounds like that product or that service has targeted a job to be done really well.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that resonates with Michael Porter's famous quote that strategy is deciding what not to do. And I guess this is on a personal level. What jobs do people not want to do, and how can we help them achieve those outcomes?
I think that's exactly right. There's a really great example of that. I don't know if you have, all your listeners will be familiar with OnStar, which is the satellite communication system that GM puts in its cars, or at least puts in a lot of its cars, where you can be driving along and press a button, and OnStar will tell you anything from where's the closest Italian restaurant to any directions to whatever. A really good example is OnStar was created in the beginning years ago as what the head of it at the time called the coolest brochureware ever. It was really sort of intended to be just something that sold more cars, like make it look really state of the art and cool. And so because its goal was simply to be the coolest brochureware ever, they threw every possible thing into it that would make it cool. And it was really fun to design, right? You want to have the ability to find the nearest Italian restaurant. We can do that. You want to get directions. We can do that. They came up with a Chinese menu. And they had so many things in it that they realized they actually had no idea why some people were choosing to renew it and a lot of people weren't. It was just too all singing, all dancing until they honed in on what job was the more meaningful one that people were really hiring it to do. And it turned out it wasn't hard for them to realize when they thought about it for a little while, people were hiring the OnStar and renewing the OnStar service for peace of mind while driving.
Yeah.
And when you know that, you've stripped it down to the real essence of that is I want to have peace of mind. I don't want to be afraid when I'm in an unfamiliar part of an unfamiliar city late at night. I want to know that if my daughter is driving to college, she can always have help if something goes wrong with the car. That helps you as the organization make all of the design and innovation choices around that, improvement choices through the lens of, okay, what's the job? And when you know the job is peace of mind, you're not going to worry about the best sat nav directions.
Yeah.
It turns out now there's a lot of competition for that. You can get it on your phone. You can get it on a GPS you put in your car. But peace of mind while driving is a very specific thing, and the context of that's important. And you can make much better choices about what customers will actually care about when you have a thoughtful, narrowed lens of what's the real job to be done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you, Karen. You've provided a wealth of knowledge for our audience, but we are down to the lightning round. This is where I ask all of my guests 3 questions, 2 hypotheticals, and 1 on lifestyle design. Are you ready?
Okay.
I'm
ready.
Awesome. Okay, so question number 1 is, if you could work for any company at any stage of the company life cycle, who would it be and why?
Oh, man. I am a startup girl at heart, even though I haven't worked so closely for that. I think working for any startup around really smart, interesting people is the full Megillah. It's the fun part of it. So maybe in early days of Google or Facebook or even Airbnb is a company I admire right now. I think that would have been really fun to be, employees 1 through 20 or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And question number 2 is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Oh, man. Having recently visited the cell that he spent decades in, I probably would like to ask Nelson Mandela how he kept his the big picture focus on what the greater mission of his life was in all those hard times. I think it's absolutely amazing. And I'd really love to know from him, looking him in the eye, how and why did he not let the bitterness eat him alive, but instead became the great leader that he did? That I would genuinely love to ask.
Fantastic. Great answer. Very, very quick off the mark, Karen. I'm impressed. A lot of people take about 30 seconds to answer that one. And finally, the last question is around lifestyle design. You used to be the editor at HBR. You're still a contributing editor, and you've written a couple of books. You've obviously kept yourself very, very busy. And I'm keen to find out from everyone that I interview, how do you stay on top of your game? Do you have any rituals or routines that you partake in on a daily basis?
Oh, interesting question. I guess I try to be as connected to people as I possibly can, even though I'm not physically always connected with them. So I am an extremely good keep up with my networker, and there's probably not a day that I don't look in the first hour at Facebook, Twitter, email. It's in addition to reading and doing what you need to do, I just want to kind of be aware of people's lives as much as their professional lives. And I think that's worked really well for staying connected to my, now very extended tribe over multiple job iterations and multiple locations, geographical locations.
Yeah, well, human relationships and networking definitely goes a long way. So where can our audience go to find out a little bit more about you, Karen?
Oh, well, actually, probably the best way to find out more about me is from my previous book. We have a website called measureyourlife.com. And there's more about my story there. And the book that probably was the beginning of restructuring my life is working on the book, which is called How Will You Measure Your Life? So there's a little bit more about me there. And I'd be happy to have people follow me on Twitter at KAR Dillon.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure to add that to the show notes. So thank you again, Karen. You've been an awesome guest, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your interest.
Cheers. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed our interview with Karen Dillon. I got a lot of value out of that, and I'm sure you did as well. As always, if you're picking up what we're putting down, take a minute to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. And to find out a little bit more about Collective Campus, you you can head to www.collectivecamp.us and download a ton of resources, including other podcasts, videos, blogs, innovation resources, and so on. Until next time, identify those jobs to be done. Future Squared out.